March doesn't just offer the early hinting of spring with the melting of the snow and the blooming of tulips. It is also the start of the small but mighty Mend March hashtag. As the interest in having a sustainable wardrobe grows, many are realizing the importance of maintaining the clothes you already own. So we come to mending. Mending is usually focused on repairing holes, whether it be through darning or patchwork, but the process of mending can also be applied to repairing stains. Some stains will come out with enough Love, Dawn dish soap and OxiClean, but others are stubborn. For example, my lovely vintage brown corduroys here, which I accidentally bleached, leaving an unsightly stain along the left side. In her book, Mend, a refashioning manual and manifesto, Kate Sekules suggests outlining stains like this with embroidery to make the stains a feature of the garment rather than a blemish. I personally have used this technique in the past, but this time I wanted to use this as an opportunity to push Studio 300's resources to the limit and feature my personal favorite spring bloom, pansies. Hi, my name is Ruth, Studio Services Specialist and Resident Embroidery Expert. For this project, I'm using Studio 300's collection of over 20,000 designs and the powerful Brother PRS 100 machine, whose free arm construction allows for easy embroidering on finished garments. If you want to learn the specifics of using the PRS 100, be sure to take my maker training on the machine hosted on Niche Academy. This tutorial is going to be project-focused, looking at how to plan and execute a large-scale machine embroidery repair. To start, I need to figure out what kind of designs will best cover the stain. I took a reference photo to get a better idea and included a ruler for scale. With this, I can see that the worst damage is along the seam, but I also need to be careful because this is where the pocket is. I also have this big spot to the right that will need one large design. And then there's a few spots here and there that I could put some small embellishments over. If you want to understand how to navigate our embroidery collection, definitely check out the maker training I mentioned. For now, I'll just say I'm using the 2-stitch thumbnailer to generate images of the designs for easy browsing. The collection is organized by theme, and under flowers, I found an entire folder of just pansy designs. By dragging that folder into 2-stitch, I can see what designs there are to work with here. As you can see, there's lots of different styles of design, some dainty, some bold. Personally, I'm looking for a series of designs that have a similar visual style so that they work well off of each other, but have a variety of sizes that I can layer across the large stained area. After a quick scan, it seems like these ones in the middle had the most potential. I like this one because it has a large area to work with, but the colors aren't really what I'm looking for. If I right-click and select Reveal in Finder, I'll be able to pull up the location of that exact design so that I can work with it. Of course, the color will change based on whatever I thread the machine with, but to get a better visual, I'll bring the design into Embrilliance. Embrilliance is a digitizing software where you can create your own custom designs, but it also allows you to make minor adjustments to pre-existing embroidery files, such as changing size and thread color. Let me just get this window a little larger, and you can see the list of thread colors that make up this design in the lower right corner. If I click on any one of them, I can change them to a different color. These colors are organized by brand, so if I don't find a shade I like, I can shift to a brand with different offerings. I think the brown of the corduroy will look really nice with more cool toned pansy flowers, and I think blues and purples will coordinate better with my pre-existing wardrobe. Once I've adjusted the colors to my liking, I'm going to click File, Save As to save the design to my personal drive. And then I'm going to go back to 2-stitch to find another design I think will work. I do have to jump back to the previous design a couple of times, just to verify that I'm selecting the same colors as before for a cohesive style. While I adjust these colors, I should note that it's a good idea to look over the color selections the studio has available. A problem I run into later on is that we don't have quite the right shades to match these designs, which will affect the gradient the stitches create. Now that I've got a few designs with the right colors, I'm going to scan them back into 2-stitch. This is so I can take screenshots with the clean white backdrop and measurements. On Mac, I'm hitting Command-Shift-4 to screenshot each of these designs, and then I'm moving those designs into my working folder to stay organized. So now I'm going to open up Photoshop and bring in that reference photo I took earlier. On top of that, I'm going to drop in my first screenshot. To get a more accurate visual, I'll use the ruler to scale the design to its actual size, but right now the background is in the way. To get rid of the background, I'm going to go up to the top toolbar and hit Select Color Range. With the eyedropper, I'm able to select the white background. In the preview, I can then see that the white thread is also getting picked up, so I'll use the subtraction eyedropper to try and save that bit. Once I hit OK, a dotted line appears around my selection, and once I hide this generative AI toolbar, I can then hit Command-Shift-I to invert my selection. So that means I'm choosing everything except the white that I had selected. From here, I can hit this little rectangle button in the bottom to mask the layer, leaving me with just the designs and the measurements that I need to resize to. As you can see, this design is 3.7 inches wide and 3.5 inches tall. So I'm going to shift it to the top of that ruler and then hit Command-T for transform to scale it down to 3.5 inches, which looks like it's about there. This isn't going to be an exact science, but it's going to give me a lot clearer of a visual than just taking the designs straight to the machine and winging it. Now I'm going to move it over to the stain and see if I can get it to cover the bulk of this ugly spot here. I don't love the way it's fitting, so I'll hide that layer for now and then try the next design. I'm going to do the same thing, selecting the white, inverting the selection, masking, then resizing. I like how this design is covering a lot better. And then I'll bring in a taller design to cover this spot along the seam. Now I'm obviously going to need a lot more than 2 designs to make this work. So I'll go back to 2-stitch and repeat the whole process of adjusting colors and brilliance, screenshotting, and playing around with the layout here in Photoshop. If you wanted to, you could do a similar technique in Canva or Adobe Express, which do have background removal tools. I just prefer Photoshop because it's easier for me to navigate complex designs that have multiple layers, and I'm just accustomed to its interface. But use whatever tool you're comfortable with and is going to help you bring your vision to life. The main reason I do this step is because it's a low-stakes way to see how designs are going to flow along a larger garment. Before the needle has even punctured the trousers, I can get a feel for the layout. At the end of day 1, this is how far I got. I used the eraser tool to clean up the lines and start fresh on day 2. Now I did forget to record my screen on day 2, but you can see how I played a lot more with the layout to cover the entire stained area on the pants, just using the techniques I already covered. The only new technique I used was this one little bud on the side here. I wanted to cover up a small blemish over here, But then the stem of the design wasn't quite long enough for me to connect it to the other flowers. In Brilliance, you can see I have the original design up here, but then I've added this second line to curve it back to the rest of the flowers. Using the Stitch Artist tool, Draw with Points, I created a simple curve, adjusted the points for a natural flow, and then added a satin column stitch. If you want a more thorough tutorial on how to use Embroidery Stitch Artist, I recommend checking out my logo design tutorial here on YouTube. If I zoom in, you can see how my addition matches the original well enough, at least to disguise it in the final layout. I really like this layout and how it flows. Now, the final test, after deleting the designs I didn't use, is to export the designs and see how it fits the overall look of the pants when they're being worn. I have this still from my initial try-on that I can layer it onto. And wow, yeah, I love the way that looks. Now all that's left to do is move these files to the machine and start stitching. Now with a complicated design like this, I had to hoop, stitch, and re-hoop many times over the course of several days. Because of the awkward shape of these trousers, I used the floating technique, which is when you hoop just an adhesive stabilizer and use that to hold your project in place. I cover this technique in detail in the PRS 100 Maker Training. This is a long process requiring a lot of patience, so be sure to give yourself plenty of time. The less time you have, the more anxious you are, and the more the machine will fight back. No matter what, problems will always arise. After my first few stitch outs, I did have to go back to the drawing board when I realized part of my design would stitch over the bottom corner of the pocket. But because I still had my Photoshop design file, I was able to go back and shift some things around. Moving that tall flower out of the way did leave an awkward gap for this bud over here, but sticking another flower head there fills that space nicely, and I'm left with an even more dynamic design with lots of dense layering. Now that all the major issues are out of the way, are you ready for a montage? I'm so happy with how these turned out. Of course, I still made a ton of mistakes. I did use a printable water-soluble stabilizer to help with positioning, but I was really impatient and inconsistent about lining things up. There's also a bit of puckering in places, so I probably could have used more stabilizer on the inside to keep that warping under control. But overall, stunning. All that's left to do now is toss it in the wash and try them on. Are you ready for the final reveal? I haven't worn these pants since I stained them. But with this embroidered mend, they're going to be back in regular rotation. I hope this video will inspire you to upcycle your own clothes in our studio so you may wear them for many years to come. If you want to learn more about any of the techniques I used here, just come down to the studio or send an email to studio300@fountaindale.org. Hope to see you soon!